Hey, what's up guys? This is Nick from Nick Expose. On this episode, we're going to dive into the photos that were posted up in the point of view video that went out earlier this week. So I went out with the Leica M2, shot some Fomapan 400, shot it at 800, so I metered for 800, then developed for 1600. We're going to cover a little bit of that today and really kind of go through the results. You guys have already seen the photos if you've seen the video. If you haven't seen the video, I'll link to it up top here, but you can go check it out. And then you'll kind of have some context for the photos that we're going to go through today. I'm going to talk a little bit about what drew me to them, what I would do a little bit different if I were to go and shoot them again, and then kind of give some initial thoughts on Fomapan 400. So without further ado, I'm going to switch over. I'm also using my live stream system in order to do this video. Hopefully I'll be able to do it all and it's flawless in execution, but if there are any quirks along the way, just bear with me. This is a new way of filming these types of videos, but I think it's going to work out. So anyways, without further ado, let's jump over to Photoshop and actually start walking through some of these photos. So here we are. You can see here, I'm just going to go through the photos just as I shot them, you know, from start to finish on how they showed up in the video and kind of give some initial thoughts. So with this Fomapan 400, this is the first time that I've ever shot this film. I get questions about it all the time from so many of you guys. I've shot Kentwood in the past, and I always get questions about these cheaper alternatives to a 400 speed black and white film. And not knowing what to go through and not knowing how it was going to handle being pushed to 1600, how it was going to handle the high contrast that I was throwing at it. I got a lot of mixed reviews from people when I first started shooting it. They told me, oh, watch out, your highlights are going to get blown, your shadows aren't going to have any details. So anyways, with this, jumping into this roll and jumping into the day for the POV, I was really, the first couple of shots were really kind of some experimentation to see how well it handled tonal contrast ranges in different ranges of contrast. So with this one, looking through the window in at this crazy shadow that was cutting down onto the stair steps. So right here you could see these stairs coming across, but jumping in and shooting throughout the day, I just kind of wanted to initially, and if you, I made a video a while back talking about how the first 5 minutes of going out and shooting are extremely crucial. And how sometimes if I second guess myself or if I don't click the shutter within the first 5 minutes, it really kind of throws off my day for shooting. So oftentimes I try to give myself some easy subjects to shoot right off the bat, and here I just wanted to really kind of test and see how it was going to handle this high contrast situation, right? You got the bright sunlight coming in on these streaks of light, which actually make a really cool pattern, and then you also have the shadows coming in from the windowsill and everything. You have the reflection in the background, so you have multiple different layers of elements going on here. And I think it handled it well. I mean, it's not a spectacular image. It's a, you know, unique image. It has some interest to it, but at the same one, I don't think that this would be one that I would really write home about. So just wanted to cover it just because it was in the video, and I do think that it kind of shows how well Fomapan actually handles some pretty high contrast situations. So this next image here, again, really trying to see how it was going to handle these high contrast. Oftentimes what I find is on certain film types, when I shoot like sandy type brick and concrete exteriors of buildings, oftentimes I could get washed out and you start to lose a lot of detail there. And I'll be honest, when I was editing this photo, it did take a little bit to get some of the detail back into the concrete or this cement siding on this wall, but really just kind of looking to see how the reflection off of the metal paneling here worked well, how the highlights on the wall worked. And all in all, I mean, like I said, it took a little bit of getting, and I overexpose my film anyways, so I start to lose a little bit of detail in scanning that way. But at the same time, I do think that it retained enough information to where I was able to go back in and really kind of make it a halfway decent image. Again, this isn't an image that I would write home about. I do like the composition here. I always, if you look through my work, there's kind of a repetition of pattern to where there will be a square and maybe a smaller square. Kind of harkens back to my love for Mark Rothko's different paintings and how he kind of composes his paintings and really kind of dives into very much the same thing over and over and over again. So Here you'll kind of see this, and you'll see it through a bunch of my work if you actually look for it. Circles and squares, and there's a repetition of patterns that I really look forward to and draw my eye to when I'm going out and shooting. I'm going to keep moving because I'm trying to keep this video somewhat concise and trying, it keeps on doing this. And try and cover a bunch of these and give some of these a little bit more weight than others, because I do think some of them deserve a little bit more weight. This corner here, if you watch back on the video, this corner is actually a corner that I shoot quite a bit. Right there on the actual corner where both roads meet, I have so many of my favorite images from Grand Rapids are actually from that corner. But then these different interesting shadows cast by these light poles, they kind of have like this gaslight type look to them, these poles, but they're always casting unique shadows at this part in the day. And I've probably shot this type of photo multiple times in the past, and I'm always looking for, you know, re-examining and kind of focusing on the subject matter and seeing if I can take a better photo than I've taken in the past. This one here, so I was waiting for this lady to walk in. I was really hoping. I love the way that her arm is draping down. She's actually, you know, her jacket here is just kind of draping over her shoulders, and the arm actually drapes down lower than you know, the rest of her. She's got this very unique stance. I lost my layer here, but she's got this very unique stance where her legs are kind of separate, so you get the little peak of light in there, and it really kind of gives some definition to the form. At the same time, she really blends in. I should have moved over to the right a little bit, because she really blends in with this wall right here in the background. Something that I constantly look for, and I may have talked about in previous POV, you know, recaps, but I want to make videos about this in the future, is really, especially in black and white, to where, you know, right here, my tonal range on her to the tonal range in the background. Let me get this little thing away. The tonal range to her to the tonal range in the background, two different colors, but at the same time, the tones still fall in the same, you know, zone. So all of a sudden, she just becomes this giant black blob that just falls into the background, and it really ruins it for me. I could crop this down and maybe kind of, oops, my line here isn't the greatest, but, you know, maybe do something like this to where it's just the legs peeking out and I cut out all the distractions of the background. But at the same time, I wanted to show this image for what it was originally, and kind of give you an idea of where I moved from that image to the next one, where I followed her down. The thing that I don't like about this image is, again, you know, you start to get these distractions that start to happen. I still have this line across the back that I'm not really thrilled on. I should have probably moved my camera, you know, pointed it a little bit further down, but there would have been a little bit too much dead space up here. And then you have this lifting of the foot, but if I was over to the left, or more so to the left, you would actually get some definition of the leg, you know, bent, actually going to step. As is right now, it just kind of looks like a peg leg. And then this shadow kind of breaking up the wall. I don't necessarily like it as a clean composition. So the interesting, or the image tends to be somewhat interesting just because you have the shadow. But when I'm looking at my work, I want there to be multiple levels of interest and not just having the shadow really do all of the work for the image. Once again, you could start to see where, and I could have brightened this up, I could have darkened it down. I had plenty of detail in the Fomapan to really bring out some of the detail of the highlights on the sidewalk up here, and then in the road and everything like that. But all in all, it's not a terrible image. These two aren't terrible images. They're just nothing spectacular. Some of the other images that I've taken on that corner are much better. So then moving through the town, I kind of went around that. That was actually the Grand Hotel that I ended up shooting in later on in the day that I talked about at the end of the video. So walking up that sidewalk, then going around back and around the side, I ended up on the other side of the Grand Hotel and ended up coming across some really cool chairs that I've wanted to shoot in the past, but the light has never been the way that it was this time around, and it really drew to me and called to me in shooting this. If you don't know my work, I shoot chairs all the time, and it's become kind of a Nick exposed meme in a way. But at the same time, these chairs, I love the way that the light falls on and illuminates these chairs here, but then the shadow of the building cut perfectly to where all the chairs in the background just fall into complete shadow. There's still enough detail there. I did dodge it out a little bit just so you could kind of see the detail of the rear chairs. I do think that it adds a layer of interest to the whole photo, but really your focus here is this shape here that's created by the highlight on this table and the chairs, and then you have these sub shapes to where you have a mimicking pattern to where you have the 2 and then the 2, and I really do actually really enjoy this this composition and the way that this image and then the next couple of images turned out. So this is one of the images that I really truly appreciate from the day, and I really like adding to my chair portfolio, I guess, if I could say that. One of the things that I will say is this bush here, and this is in a couple images, to where this bush here didn't really translate the way that I wanted it to. It's a little blocky, and it is due to like high contrast of the scene. It's due to high contrast of the film. Here I could dodge all this out, but in here, once I start dodging some of this out, it starts to raise the highlights, and it makes the highlights really to a place that I don't want them to be. It starts to become a distracting element. As it is right now, I don't think that it's too distracting. It's just not as subtle as I would have liked. The sharp contrast on it kind of draws your eyes down constantly, but it gives a pretty fair balance to you know, the weight of the chairs and the shadows in the background. So there is a foreground, middle ground, background element here. So at the same time, I do think that it still works pretty well. Moving on to the vertical version of this, a lot of the times in my work as well, you'll start to see there's these 7s that start to emerge and show up in my work. I really love adding these interesting angles and these dynamic compositions in where your eye starts to lead in. You know, there's a very clear focal point of where your eye is going to lead in, because you have this giant mass of the bush in the foreground, and then immediately it starts to open up and it's a much more clear background. So you start to enter in here, you come up here, your eyes follow over, and then you just kind of come back down because of the contrast of the scene. So you get really kind of sucked in and you know, just captured right in this area here, to where in this case, personally, I do think that the bush in the foreground really helps to direct the eye up, and I do like where the fall off of the shadow really gets kind of dark and gloomy down here. I do think I might have burnt some of this in here, but at the same time, most of this is just kind of a natural way of, I think there was a giant canopy over to the behind me that was also blocking some of the light that was coming over onto these bushes here. So once again, you get this very clear, distinct front element of chairs, and then the subtle textures in the back. And I really do like the little rim lights here that end up on the top of the chair, and then the highlights over here on the table. It just kind of adds a very unique little point of reference and interest that your eye can go over to and really kind of search out. Then moving over to the chairs that were stacked on top of each other, there's actually, watching back and when I was editing through the video and making the video, I was seeing things. This is always the thing when I do point of view videos, is I start to see things that I start thinking, why didn't I go and kind of press into that a little bit more? But despite there being some other areas that I would have liked to have photographed in this scene, I really do like how this turned out. Again, this kind of goes back to the abstraction that we started the very first image out, to where I'm really looking to see, one, how the contrast works for this, you know, the sandy concrete and how the highlights fall. And I think right here, it really retained a lot of good detail in here. But then really crushing those blacks, and I didn't really have to crush them down in post much at all, because the contrast of the film is quite punchy. So there's only a little bit of dropping my tonal curve in the blacks down to where they went super black. But here I'm just really working off of the lines and the shapes. I mean, this makes all sorts of unique lines and shapes throughout that really start giving your eye kind of a little creative playground to, you get caught up on, and kind of like a little Ferris wheel up here. You know, if I think about things through other ways of explaining things, if I was going to say that this was some sort of amusement park, because I just went to an amusement park a couple weeks ago, and it's still on the top of my mind, I start to break things down in that kind of terminology, and I start going, okay, if this is an amusement park, what's what? Anyways, I digress. Really, I do think that there's some great bits of tension for the eye to go through. One of the things here, you could see this little peeking bit of light. If I would have moved to the left just a little bit, that pocket would have opened up a little bit more, and it would have broken up this giant block, and it would actually made a really unique shape to where you would have had this probably triangle of light here, and you would have had this extra little bit of interest. At the same time, that's one of those things to where I still like the shapes that are being formed. I still like the geometric patterns and the directing of the eye. There's plenty of ways for the eye to be introduced to the scene. There's plenty of ways for the eye to be, you know, exited from the scene. You have this downward motion that kind of moves your eyes down this way. And when sequencing and pairing up with another image, I could put another geographic and stark image here, or this could be on the right side of the page and really direct your eye to the next set of pages. So when standing alone, sometimes that can be a hindrance, but when you start thinking in sequencing, you could start looking at exit strategies for pieces of work to be able to lead your eyes into the next, you know, piece of work or the next spread in general. So moving forward, we go back to the chairs. Once again, I included this little, you know, edge of the tables here just to give that bit of you know, interest. If I wouldn't have, this would have been all black, which could have been, you know, an interesting image. If you start looking at it from here, it just makes these two stark, contrasty white shapes within there. But going with the rest of the images and kind of building a sequence of you know, working the scene and conversing with the scene, I wanted to add that in there just then it didn't become too abstract. You could see little bits and pieces of the dappled light coming through the bushes in the back. It kind of adds a little bit of interest. It kind of adds a little bit of texture and tonality that I think that really adds to this this nice little triptych of chairs. You know, these particular chairs that I shot. The big thing that drew me to this, and I won't spend too much time on these because I don't think these next two images are that, you know, amazing. The big thing that drew me here was this curve of the lid of the wine box. So it's been outside for who knows how long. It's been baked down on the sun. It's been rained on. All sorts of different things have come in and elements to play. And it gave it this crazy warp. Like the backside was seated completely down, but then the front side just had this like banana warp on it, and it made it really, really interesting. So I put the close-up goggles on the Summicron and got in close, and I really wanted to highlight that, but at the same time I don't necessarily know that it really shows that that was the subject of the thing. This next one, I really wanted to see what would happen. This is one of those things of what would happen if I just start asking myself questions. And I go, with the close-up goggles on, I know that my field of view and my depth of view is exaggerated, and I really wanted to see what happened when the railing in the handle of the cart became out of focus, and you know how much distortion it would add and all these different things. So I like how the handle went out of focus. At the same time, some of the elements in here I tried dodging out. There was some writing on the napkins that were in here. I tried dodging it out. It didn't really turn out that great. I probably would have had the detail in there if I was shooting HP5, but at the same time, once again, this isn't that great of an image to really, you know, cry about and not being able to salvage. Going back to chairs, here's another stack of chairs to where in this one, I almost shot just the stack of chairs, but then I really thought it'd be interesting to move over to the left and incorporate, once again, the bush in here. And I don't know, it really doesn't do it for me. I still included it in the video because I want you guys to see some of the stuff that I'm not too thrilled on anyways, but it ended up just abstracting it a little bit too much to where now it's absolutely just, you know, lines and shape and tonality, and not in a good way. I'm very much for going that kind of route, but here it just doesn't make anything appealing. If there was a little bit more interest, maybe if I would have put a little bit of a break here to where you could see the corner of the chair and then the edge of the bush, and then there was a little bit of break in there, you'd be able to actually notice that there are chairs. I do like the repetition of pattern here to where you get these three distinct lines, but it just doesn't do it for me. One of the things that you'll probably notice here in the sequence of images that I shoot on one roll is once I start getting into the groove on a certain thing, like I started conversing with the chairs on the outside, once I start going inside to places or wherever, when I continue moving forward, I start having that same conversation in different ways over and over and over again. And once again, like I said, I shoot chairs all the time, but it started to become a highlight and a focus of the day's shooting. So here, one of the things that I absolutely love is I didn't even notice until just now that that there's a little to-go box up here from somebody's like takeout meal. But I do like the detail of the other chair in front. I love this little pocket of pattern, and then this other little pocket of pattern, and how they overlap. And you just get these elements of pattern. You get the pattern repeated down here and then all of a sudden, you know, there's just this stark contrast. Let's take care of some of these. But once again, I'm really just trying to break the scene down to stark elements of composition, and then just these different patterns and the repetition of patterns throughout. So you start getting this graphic design element once again. Here, same kind of thing. I didn't salvage the highlights as well. I could have probably rescanned. There was a lot more detail in here. I scanned it for the shadows, not for the highlights. If I were to go back and scan for the highlights, I could probably actually get more detail in here. But once again, I'm going for the pattern there. I'm going for this stark contrast and this crazy cutout of shape that's made here. But then moving to the next one, which is, I think, you know, in my opinion, a much stronger composition. I actually just recomposed and moved over just slightly to be able to take from a direct on approach to a sideways approach, which gave the chair this straight angle, but then the highlight obviously at this angular slope here, which gives great context and tension for your eyes to be able to approach the scene. And then this one little pocket of highlight over here just adds that little bit of balance to where otherwise the scene might have fallen over left because of the weight of all of this. This gives that little bit of balance to kind of complement everything that's happening over here, to where once all is said and done, it's just this beautiful, I don't know, tension of mystery. And in contrast, it kind of feels like a film noir film, right? It kind of feels like a scene from, you know, one of the new James Bond films, or maybe The Godfather or something like that, to where it has a very cinematic feel, just because the small bit of information that you're given in your mind really has to start filling in the points for the rest of it. The nice thing is you start to get the actual detail of the chair here, and there's just enough information without giving anything more than just enough to be able to figure out that it's a chair sitting in the highlight of a window. So continuing forward, and I'm going to try and run through these really quick. I've shot this scene multiple times. I constantly revisit it just to see if there's a different way that I could tell it. I like the superior right here. I continue to draw towards these words on the window and then trying to catalog them in a different way. So getting to see the words backwards, you know, open and superior and 115, but then starting to add these elements of the door, elements of the shadow, and really allowing the illuminated interior to really make this gentle background for the words to just fall on. Once again, it's just graphic design. This is where a shift happens. So once again, one conversation will lead into another conversation. So in the conversation that I was having for the day, I was talking, you know, chairs constantly, looking for different chairs, looking for the patterns on chairs, and just trying to play that card as much as I possibly could. Then seeing this guy sitting here, seeing his shirt hanging, I just love the way that the shirt hangs. I love the way that it almost looks like this guy has sat in this exact same place over and over and over again, and that this is a daily regimen for him. It seems so comfortable for him to be sitting here, to be watching, you know, the stocks happen on the TV, and then his shirt is just sitting there waiting to go home. And he probably did it yesterday, he probably did it the day before, he'll probably do this again next week. And I just love that little pocket of someone's life. It's almost like a bit of intimacy just because you get to see the daily routine. But this started into really searching after you know, bits and pieces of, you know, clothing and fashion and things like that. Because if we continue moving forward, all of a sudden I walk past the fashion boutique, the men's fashion boutique afterwards, once again using the door frame to make this giant obscurity in the frame to really focus the eye over on this one side. I love the detail that ends up in just the reflection of the wood here, but then just enough here to give this outline of the you know, the jacket and the suit and everything, just giving that little bit of interest in men's clothing, and then continuing forward to the next, which I think is just a selfie. You always gotta put selfies in there. If I were to change one thing in here, it would be that I would have opened my eye. That's always kind of the big thing, right? Do you keep your eye open or do you close it when you're doing selfies? But then coming outside and then just seeing this guy who is just this older gentleman, just unique style. The wristwatch, the you know, the pants and the way that the pockets fell and everything like that. The folds of the shirt. It was just super unique. I didn't want to be creepy and walk up beside him and shoot. But then also the missed belt loop here, right? And just these little bits and pieces, these fragments of fashion, these fragments of someone's daily life. You know, it's kind of creepy. I'm walking alongside him, kind of shooting towards the rear. But at the same time, getting that little bit of fragment of someone's daily life. And then the highlight on his hair was just incredible. The sun coming through and just giving this highlight. All of a sudden, there's this beautiful glare shooting right up into the sun. A lot of people try and avoid shooting direct sun. I try and shoot into the sun as often as possible, because sometimes you get these just amazing little pockets of glare. But just focusing on that highlight of his hair, because it was just incredible. Here, I think on both these next images, I should have moved this way and I should have shot this way. I should have put him against more of the tree and then not had this giant pocket of highlight show up in the frame, because this really draws the eye and competes with his hair. Same thing on the next and last image here is the end of the roll. But once again, I have this giant area and then this sign too that just become a distraction. If I would have moved this way and shot this way, or just turned the camera more this way, I could have put him against more of the background, and it would have just been more, you know, dark subtlety of background. His hair, which was starting to not be as lit as the previous image, but his hair would have just popped off of this background here. So anyways, out of all the images, I think these images back here, where are they at, of the chairs, were really kind of my favorites from the day. And then also I really enjoy the not the selfie, but this image here, and then the image of the shirt hanging, and just starting to focus in and starting to watch how, you know, not consciously but subconsciously, my mind started transitioning from chairs over to clothing and apparel, and the way that people just live life, and just the cool things like that. So I don't know, it's very interesting. So anyways, hopefully this stuff is interesting for you guys. You know, I know it's a lot of just rambling. I know that I'm 30 minutes in. Hopefully I'll be able to cut this down to maybe a 20-25 minute video, something like that. But I do think that there's a lot of interesting things that when you start re-examining the work that you shoot, even if you're not making a POV video, even if you're not doing any kind of video like this, I think going back through and re-examining why it is that you shot the things that you shot. This is why people love contact sheets so much, of getting to sit down with your work and really scrutinizing it, criticizing it. And I probably went a little bit easier on myself just for the sake of letting you guys know what was drawing my eye. Most of this stuff won't even hit the social media feed, just because a lot of it isn't great. A lot of it isn't, you know, spectacular. But at the same time, you know, this is just some of the thought process that goes through my head as I'm shooting through some of this stuff. So I'd love to hear what you guys think on this kind of video. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are down in the comments down below. What is it that drew you to some of these images? Do you disagree with some of the things that I was saying? I'd love to hear all that in the comments down below. And then also be on the lookout for some future videos to where, you know, if there's particular images in my feed that you would like me to critique, it doesn't even need to be from a POV video. If you'd like me to sit down and actually critique some of the other images that I've shot and talk about, you know, what I think works about them, what I don't think works about them, let me know what images you'd like me to do, because I could see this becoming kind of a string of videos to where maybe I take 2 images per video and kind of really break them down that way. So a huge thank you to our Patreon crowd. I talk about it in pretty much every single video, but I just want to give you guys a huge thank you. Also a huge thank you to our executive producers over there on Patreon. You guys are making videos like this and equipment like this. I wouldn't have this equipment. I wouldn't have this webcam, this microphone, any of this stuff, if it wasn't for the support of our Patreon crowd. So thank you guys. I love you guys. I'll see you guys on the next video. And until then, go and push yourselves 2 stops. Peace.